can check in, but you can't check out. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we're going to actually rank the Nightmare on Elm Street series from worst to best, from the bottom of the barrel to the top of the heap. And let's get right into it. At the very bottom is Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare. Of course, what else could it be? An absolute farce of the Nightmare on Elm Street series. It makes a joke, it makes a parody of everything that makes a Nightmare on Elm Street great. It's chock full of cheesy one-liners. It's nothing but comedy. It's just a complete farce. And like when you see Freddy with the power glove from Nintendo and he's controlling the people like a video game, you see him bouncing around like Super Mario Brothers. It's just wrong. What are they doing? Where do you begin with that movie? It's got a whole 20-minute sequence of 3D, talk about camp value. It's got some of the worst CGI you've ever seen. It just does not hold up. It wasn't even good back then. Talk about a gimmick. Everyone put your 3D glasses on. Next up we got in at number 8. It's A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 remake. And the remake that nobody was asking for. Who asked for this movie? Nobody. Just trying to make a quick buck, a quick cash grab on the name of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. But again, they found out the hard way that you cannot replace Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. You just can't do it. They should have learned their lesson back when they tried to do that on Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Because they were going to replace him back then, and they were going to make some random stuntman Freddy, and they found out nobody can play Freddy Krueger except Robert Englund. And rightfully so. That mantle belongs to him. Next up, we are going to talk about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. Another one that gets into real camp territory with that Super Freddy. You know, he comes out of the comic book. Again, we're getting into a lot of real campiness, and, you know, the one-liners by Freddy. He becomes like a comedian. He becomes like a parody of what he was in the original film. And that's not Robert Englund's fault. It's the script. And, you know, you're dealing with lesser directors now that, you know, they're just getting a random one shot at the series, and they really don't know where to take it. And it did have its moments. I love that scene where, you know, see the monster baby, and he grows to become full-blown Freddy, and he's like, "It's a boy!" I love that one. That's a great line. And I like where they were going with that at the beginning, where they showed what happened with Amanda Krueger, Freddy's mother, and how he came to be. You know, with a bastard son of 1,000 maniacs, they all corner her, and you know, she gets raped, and, you know, it's a horrible way to be born, you know, and that's kind of how Freddy becomes into be this evil madman in a way. You know, he's abused as a child, and, you know, and I like where they were going that, but they didn't really explore that too much. They just got into a whole bunch of comic nonsense. And we did get Lisa Wilcox, who starred in Part 4 as well, and she does a fine job. She is a solid final girl. And that's one thing about the series. It does have continuity, unlike some other franchises like, you know, a Hellraiser or a Halloween. They have a lot of problems with continuity. Nightmare on Elm Street's pretty solid with that. Each movie continues from the next one, pretty much. So that's one thing I like about it. Next up is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, A Dream Master. And I do love that one scene, as I told you before, the Roach Motel. That's classic. That's the one thing from that movie that I always remember, is that scene, the cockroach. The girl turns into a cockroach, and she ends up in the Roach Motel, you know. And Freddy squashes it, and you see the gore, you know. It's an awesome scene. And it did have some cool visual stuff with the nightmares in Part 4. And I like that it continued for part 3. You still had some of those Dream Warriors remaining, and he picks them off one by one, you know. And I like that some of the cast members returned. And one thing I didn't like is that they changed the character of Kristen Parker. You know, they made a different actress this time. It's Tuesday Night instead of Patricia Arquette. And she didn't quite have that same spunk, you know, wasn't quite as solid a performance. She's not a talented actress like Patricia Arquette. So, I mean, she did a decent job, but you really notice, you definitely notice that they changed the actress, and that's one of the things that takes you out of it, you know. But it was a pretty solid entry. Next up, we have Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. A lot of people loved that entry. A lot of people thought that was a real return to form for the series, and the fact that Wes Craven came back to take on his baby, the horror series that he created. He came back to revitalize it as it was becoming stale, it was becoming campy, and he really did inject some new life into it, I must say. And I do love the concept of the movie within a movie, how it showed, you know, Robert Englund playing himself, and Heather Langenkamp playing herself, and Wes Craven playing himself. And they're haunted in their dreams by Freddy Krueger, the thing that they created on screen. So I really like that concept, and it could have been done a little bit better. It does have some pacing issues. It's really slow at times, you know, and I find myself nodding off a couple times pretty much every time I watch it. But it does have some good scary scenes, and I love that they made Freddy scary again, which is the most important thing. And it really had great makeup, and he was back to his roots. He was scary again. It wasn't spouting off the one-liners left and right. He was really menacing. So that's why it's in at number 4. Next, we're going to have Freddy vs. Jason as the next entry. A lot of fun. I love this film. It's just pure fun, you know. Grab your box of popcorn, you know, just have fun with it. As you watch these two icons of horror history clash, you know, the ultimate battle of slasher supremacy. Two legends of the horror genre. What could be more exciting than that? And it does live up to its name in a lot of aspects. There is some cheesiness. There's some cheesy, campy acting. But there's some great blood and gore, and the final fight does live up to the hype, you know. And so there is some bad CGI, you know. There is some cringe-worthy scenes, I'm not gonna lie. Some really bad acting once again. Okay, next up on the list is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. A lot of people might, you know, think that's controversial that I put it that high, because Part 2 is much maligned by a lot of the fans. A lot of the fans put that at the bottom, you know. But not me. I think there's a lot of great stuff in Freddy's Revenge. There's a lot of great scary scenes that are really well shot, well directed, and there's some real tension in the movie. And I love that Freddy's really scary still, as he was in the first one. He's just as scary and menacing, and it's always dimly lit. You don't ever get a good look at him, really, you know. And he is not spouting the one-liners left and right, although he does have some classic lines. You've got the body, I've got the brains. Gotta love that one. And there's definitely some cringe-worthy scenes, let me tell you, like with Jesse dancing around. Ugh, why? And that's what keeps it from being at the, you know, top, but respectable spot at number 3. And at number 2 is, of course, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors, an excellent entry in the franchise. Many people consider this to be the best sequel, and I can't argue with that, because it is solid. There's no cheesiness, there's no campiness. It's full-on, just an excellent sequel. And we also did have Wes Craven returning to write the screenplay. He didn't direct it, but he did write the screenplay, and it shows, because it's a solid entry. And you got Heather Langenkamp returning to the iconic role of Nancy. And you had another great performance by Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, and definitely has some of his best one-liners ever. You know, welcome to prime time, bitch. You know, here's your break in TV. Awesome. And I love the concept of the Dream Warriors, how this group of mental patients get together and they're all having the same dream with Freddy Krueger. And they decide how they're going to deal with it through group therapy. I love that idea. And I love that in the dreams they have their own powers and they all get together to team up against Freddy Krueger. And I just looked at that's a really cool concept. And next up, of course, we have at number 1, there's no question about it, and that is A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. The slasher classic. Starring Heather Langenkamp, John Saxon, and an early performance by Johnny Depp in his first starring role, I believe, in a film. And man, what can I say? It's just an absolute masterpiece of the horror genre. It's at a time when the slasher genre had kind of run its course, and you know, they had all those Halloween knockoffs, like The Prom Night and My Bloody Valentine, all those one-shots that were just ripping off Halloween. This was not a Halloween ripoff. This was a very original movie with a real original concept. And it just brought the slasher genre from the doldrums, you know. And you had a really original, creative concept of a boogeyman that haunts you in your dreams. We've all experienced that, so everyone can relate to that. We've all been chased around by the boogeyman in our dreams, and we're about to be killed, and that's when we wake up and we're sweating, you know. And that's what's so great about Nightmare on Elm Street. And boy, there's some awesome scenes, there's awesome dream sequences, some really scary, tension-filled suspense in the original film. And Freddy's a really menacing boogeyman, you know. And that's probably why he's the most iconic boogeyman of the horror genre. That he's the one that everybody knows, Freddy Krueger. Everybody knows Freddy Krueger. And everybody loves him. Everybody loves the original film Nightmare on Elm Street, and rightfully so, because it's an absolute masterpiece of terror and suspense. Nightmare on Elm Street in at number 1, folks. Thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.